At the Glass. I'm your host, Mark. Uh, this episode, I'm going to do a little recap from week 2 of the college football season. I do apologize. I didn't get around to doing a week 1 recap. I was a little busy over here. Also, with this podcast recordings and future recordings, I going to try to plan to do an overview of a beverage that I am consuming at the moment. And so before we dive into whatever we are discussing, whether it's recap of college football, baseball, whatever it be, special events, etc. So with that, this week, or for this episode, I am drinking Weller Special Reserve. The brand was created by the Weller Distilling Company. Like I said, it was sold several times after 1972. Since 1999, the brand has been owned by the Sazerac Company. It has produced, Weller is produced at Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky. And Weller is distilled from a mash composed of at least 51% corn. And the secondary grain used for the Weller brand is wheat, where most bourbons use rye. The original wheated bourbon whiskey features an exceptional smooth taste. I just took a sip. It is very smooth for being 90 proof. Some might say it's too hot. That's almost like drinking water to me. You can always add ice or a little bit of water to it to tone it down if it's too much heat for you. Like I said, the smooth taste, substituting wheat for the rye grain. The bourbon stands out with its burnt orange color. It's definitely amberish, burnt, as most whiskeys are when they come out of the barrels. As for the tasting notes, to the nose, it's a sweet nose with the presence of caramel, or caramel, however those people up north like to pronounce it. Tasting notes of honey, butterscotch, and a soft woodiness. Like I said, it is very smooth, delicate, and calm. Features a smooth finish with a sweet honeysuckle flair. It is by far one of my favorite ones to drink regularly. If we don't have a fancy one, I'm not saying go get fancy bourbon or whiskey or anything like that, but for the money you spend on it, like I said, some want overcharge. It shouldn't be more than $25 for a basic bottle for Weller Special Reserve. It's green bottle. It's got the label on it, green label and all that. So with that, like I said, it's smooth. You can also mix it if you're one of those like I want to make a good old fashioned. Weller Special Reserve is a great one to use. So with that, let's dive right into a week 2 recap of the college football season. I'll be covering several schools that obviously Sam, where I went, my Baylor, where my wife and her family, like dad and sister went, and mom, and I'll be covering some other schools that family members or friends went to. And then I'll just do like a quick just recap of the top 10 and in general from week 2. So with that, we'll get going with my Bearcats and good old Sam Houston State, eat 'em up. So after a big opening week win against Rice, the Bearcats were quickly brought back to reality. They traveled to Orlando, where Central Florida is located. It was going to be a tall task on both sides of the ball to take down the Knights. Fortunately, the Bearcats, like I said, were no match for Central Florida. The Bearcats lost pretty soundly, 45-14. So they could not get much going on offense against UCF's defense. Bearcats managed only 118 total yards in the first half and 282 total yards for the whole game, where Central Florida had 554 total yards. Running back DJ McKinney led the Bearcats with 22 rushing yards out of the 67 total rushing yards the Bearcats had on the ground. Hunter Wilson for the Bearcats had 82 passing yards and 2 interceptions. Both of those interceptions were on Central Florida's side of the field. So costly turnover there, fortunately, but that's how it goes. Jace Bauer took over late in the game at QB, threw for 1 touchdown and 73 yards. So again, not much excitement on the offensive side for the game for the Bearcats. compared to the previous week against Rice where they won. But that's why we play and keep moving forward. As for the defense, didn't have much of an answer for the run game. Central Florida could pretty much run anywhere they wanted to. Had 384 total rushing yards. Central Florida's R.G. Harvey accounted for 126 out of those 384 rushing yards, and he had 4 rushing touchdowns. The secondary did okay. I don't think they really tested too much, considering that Central Florida was able to run majority of the time, and so they only gave up 169 to the air. But we'll see. Like I said, being able to run, passing wasn't much needed by their top QB, who, like I said, transferred in from Arkansas. Looking forward to this week's game for the Bearcats. Like I said, hopefully they bounce back as they take on Hawaii, who's 1-1 on the season. Hawaii lost a close one to UCLA last week. This will be the Bearcats' first home game of the season. Bearcats are currently favored by 4.5 points. Let's see if they can capitalize and find the run game again and get the whole offense moving forward again. So against the Rainbow Warriors from Hawaii. So it should be a good game. Looking forward to a victory, hopefully, and so they move to hopefully 2-1 on the season. Next is the Baylor Bears. Yeah. So the Bears traveled to Utah. Like I said, when I was doing the Big 12 breakdown, this wasn't a conference game. Even though Utah is in the Big 12, this was not a conference game. It was just a scheduled non-conference game for the Bears. So they traveled to Utah and take on the Utes. The score may seem like the Bears were in it, but in reality, they were not. Just was not a pretty game. Like I said, the Baylor's offense came out like it was Halloween season. It was a nightmare start for the offense, and they could not ever really recover from the start. They had missed blocks, did not pick up pass rush off the edge. It just was not good. Like I said, Utah blocked a field goal try and returned it for a touchdown. Like I said, they could not get anything going right direction on offense and special teams for that sake. Baylor offense had negative 10 yards on 10 plays in the first quarter and did not gain a first down until midway through the second quarter. Only totaled 48 yards by halftime. Oof, rough. Like I said, nightmare. Halloween season. It wasn't even Sunday scaries. It was just Saturday scaries. That's what it was. And, so with that, the Bears finished with 223 yards of total offense and a second start with the Bears. Daquan Finn threw for 115 yards and a touchdown. Finn struggled against Utah's defense, losing a fumble and getting sacked 3 times. Dawson Pendergrass led the team with 69 rushing yards. That was pretty much it for the Bears offense. Like I said, not much to highlight against a good Utah defense. Defense overall held their ground as best they could with the lack of production on the offense side of the ball. Defense shut out Utah in the second half, but they did not have to face Utah's star quarterback Cam Rising in the second half due to an injury he suffered near the end of the first half. Like I said, props to the Bears defense, capitalizing on with key players out of the game to keep the game relatively close to see if the offense could get anything going. And like I said, just the offense could never find rhythm to get their offensive game moving. I think if a player had to be highlighted for the Bears, it is probably the punter. The punter had, I think, a 75-yard punt during the game, and he seemed to be about the only highlight, like I said, the Bears had going. So this upcoming week, the Bears will host Air Force, who are 1-1 on the season. The Bears hopefully can get the offense moving in the right direction, build up their confidence in Finn before they head into conference play. O-line will need to step up and be better on the line to give Finn time to throw and open the lanes for the backfield to run. Like I said, the Bears are favored by 15.5 points against Air Force, and let's see if that they will put stuff together on offense and get the W this upcoming week. Moving on to Texas Longhorns. Unfortunately, I did not get around to covering the SEC before the season started. So as you know, Texas is no longer in the Big 12. They're now in the SEC. So they look to continue to grow on their incredible season last year where they lost in the semi-playoffs to the Washington Huskies. So I apologize, like I said, for not covering them before the start of the season. So with that, Longhorns travel to Ann Arbor to take on the defending national champions, Michigan. The Longhorns straight up manhandled the Wolverines with a 31-12 victory. This was the only second meeting ever between these two schools. The first meeting was in the Rose Bowl following the 2004 season with none other than Vince Young as their quarterback. So we know how that turned out the following season when they won the national championship back there at the Rose Bowl against USC. But throughout the game, this past week's game, Ewers threw for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. As a team, they combined for 143 rushing yards. Gunnar Helm led the team with 98 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. The Longhorns' defense forced 3 turnovers in the Wolverines' running game, held the Wolverines' running game in check by holding them to only 80 total rushing yards for the game. The Longhorns controlled the line of scrimmage with ease and never looked back throughout the game. It looked like they came out with a great game plan and stuck to it and just, like I said, held the Wolverines in place and just kept it going. Longhorns, with that victory, moved to 2-0 in the season. They play UTSA this weekend, in which they are heavily favored. Like I say, never want to take an opponent lightly. And I say that because look at Notre Dame after this last week, who had lost to Northern Illinois. Good for Northern Illinois for prepping and preparing and coming out and putting up a good victory against the Irish. Like I said, like what I was getting at is, like, I know I didn't cover them before, but so with the Longhorns, they're looking strong to start the season off. They'll be challenged once conference gets underway in the SEC, but they do look strong to hold their ground and make a strong playoff push to get back or make the playoffs, since the playoffs has expanded to 12 teams. While I was just looking around and researching on them today, I noticed that they picked up a commitment from the number 1 safety for the 2026 class. So the Shark, Steve Sarkisian, has it rolling in Austin, and he will keep it rolling there for sure. So for that, we'll move to the Longhorns rivals, which none other than Texas A&M Aggies, which they look to renew their lovely rival in football this year after, what was it, 11-year absence from playing them when last they were both in the Big 12 before A&M moved to the SEC. But so that should be a good game when those two face off later in the year. But anyway, for the Aggies, they bounced back after losing a hard-fought battle to Notre Dame to kick off the season last week. The Aggies took care of business against FCS Southland opponent McNeese State. Aggies came out on top 52-10. This was Elko's first win as head coach for the Aggies as he took over the job, who was Jimbo Fisher for the past 6 years, who just, as we all know, did not pan out like they had thought he would do for the Aggies. But he's gone. Elko's in. Elko did a phenomenal job at Duke for the 2 years he was there. So looks like good things for Elko and the Aggies moving forward. But for the Aggies, like I said, they scored 2 touchdowns. Not 2 touchdowns. They scored touchdowns on their first 5 possessions of the game against McNeese to jump out to a 35-0 lead. with the big lead early. A lot of starters were removed prior, right at half or not sooner, so that way they could get rest and not get banged up for next week's game. Wegman, who did not perform very well previous week against Notre Dame, came out this week throwing for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. Like I said before, he was taken out of the game just due to the lead, and they felt like he got enough work in before, that way they didn't have to keep him out there. Moss and Daniels both have 2 rushing touchdowns each. Aggies threw for 169 yards and rushed for 330 yards. The Aggies defense forced 2 turnovers and did not allow McNeese to do much of anything throughout the whole game with even the subs in. Aggies, who are 1-1 on the season, who have not won on the road since 2021 when they traveled to Missouri and won there. So they will be traveling to Florida this week and to take on the Gators, who are in a must-win situation if Bayou Billy wants to keep his job for the Gators. Like I said, it won't be an easy win for the Aggies, as Gainesville, the Swamp, is always a tough place to play in. However, Aggies are favored by 3.5. O-line can provide the protection and time for Wegman to settle in the pocket, to throw and create running lanes. Offense will be able to move the ball. That's in logic for offense, but that'd be key, though, just to get Wegman confident and be able to throw the ball and just believe in himself. Defense, do what they do best and be a wrecking crew. Keep the Gators in check. I know they're going to split time between their star quarterback and their other one who had started the season against Miami Hurricanes. So we'll see how they can handle the switching of the QB situation back there. So looking forward to that fun matchup. Oklahoma, covering them. My brother-in-law went there. My cousin went there. So have ties there. So I'll give them a little coverage, and that way keep up with them. The Sooners, like I said, as well, they no longer in the Big 12. They have moved over to the SEC as well, just like Texas. So they're in the SEC now. And so we'll look to see how they come out playing this year. Like I said, in the first 2 games, they are 2-0 in the season. They held off U of H, who was manhandled pretty easily the previous week by UNLV. The reason why I say they were manhandled because Oklahoma struggled to move the ball on offense against U of H. The Sooners were outgained by the Cougars in total yards. The Cougars had 318 total yards to the Sooners 249, and the passing game as well. U of H threw for 260 yards, and the Sooners only threw for 174 yards. Jackson Arnold, QB for the Sooners, threw for the 174 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Javonte Barnes led OU in rushing with 40 yards. Jake Roberts and Brendan Thompson both had a receiving touchdown each. The Sooners defense stepped up late in the game to seal the win with an interception by Robert Spears Jennings on a late drive. And then the Sooners got a late safety from Grayson Halton to extend the lead a little bit. OU's offense still isn't clicking, but look to keep building on what they have been able to accomplish so far in the season as they take on Tulane this weekend, who put up a hard fight against Kansas State. They came up short, so Tulane will definitely come out ready to put up a good fight this week against the Sooners, and the Sooners are favored by 13. Moving on to LSU Tigers. A lot of family went there as well. Just a lot of Louisiana family support them, and friends went there, so we'll give them a coverage as well throughout the year. So here we go with the Tigers. They did bounce back after losing a close game to USC to open the season last week. Tigers took care of the FCS opponent Nichols with a 44-21 win. Garrett threw for 302 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. The running game is still a bit of a struggle for the Tigers. They only had 68 rushing yards against Nichols. With 4 returning starters on the line, they need to get the run game going ASAP, because if they can't run, then they'll just play one back and for passing, and then they won't need to stack the box to prevent the run. Karen Lacey led the way for the wide receiver group with 3 touchdown receptions. C.J. Daniels led all wide receivers with 71 receiving yards. Defense held the passing game in check, but did give up 150 rushing yards total. 145 of those yards came from Nichols' top running back. They did cause 1 turnover, which was a fumble. Did a quick little fun fact for LSU. As the LSU home opener this past weekend marked the 100th year in Death Valley for LSU. First opening on Thanksgiving Day in 1924. LSU has won 452 games in Tiger Stadium. That's pretty impressive. LSU hits the road this weekend. They're traveling to South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks for LSU's conference opener. The Tigers are favored by 7 on the road there. So we'll see how they do against the Gamecocks. So that covers week 2 takeaways and recap from all the schools that either I went to, my wife went to, or family and friends went to. Like I said, I will continue to do coverage throughout the year or the season for those schools, and like I said, just various other schools or highlights throughout the year. So with that, I'll do a quick recap of just for the top 10 from this past week. Georgia took on Tennessee Tech, manhandled them with ease. They won 48-3. Ohio State, same thing, came out, took care of business against Western Michigan, won 56-0. Texas was number 3, took care of number 10 Michigan, like I said, 31-12. The Alabama played South Florida. They won 42-16. Looks like it was pretty close up until the fourth quarter, where Alabama put up 28 points to South Florida's 3 and ran away with the victory. As I mentioned earlier, Notre Dame, who was 5th at the time. Again, the rankings, in my opinion, do not matter at the start of the season. It's like basketball. It does not mean anything. I think they have to do it just to give someone to talk about, just to give some kind of recognition going on with teams. So I wouldn't look too much into it. We know who's good, who isn't good, but they have to do rankings. So, like I said, because Notre Dame was 5th, ranked 5th, they lost to Northern Illinois 16-14. Like I said, good for Northern Illinois. Ole Miss took care of Middle Tennessee State 52-3. Oregon squeaked out a victory against Boise State 37-34. Penn State, same, they were played very close by Bowling Green, but Penn State won 34-27. Missouri won easily 38-0 against Buffalo. And like I said, 10 was Michigan, who played Texas, and there. I do think, real quick, Tennessee is now, I think, ranked top 10. Tennessee is going to be is solid this year too, so they're going to be a fun team to follow as they move along in the SEC, and so they'll be a good one to keep up with from there. And like I said, since 12 teams make the playoffs now and not 4, based off the first 2 weeks, like, well, what about, it's technically been 3 weeks. Yes, there's teams that played before Labor Day weekend. I mean, it is what it is on that. I mean, Florida State did lose. We know that they're not good this year. So with that being said, anyway, Bulldogs are, like I said, looking strong. They're 2-0, being ranked 1. So there's no reason why I don't see why they don't make playoffs. For Longhorns being number 2, looking dominant. They're going to be in. Ohio State, same thing. They should be in. Ole Miss being number 4. Hurricanes number 5. Trojans 6. Ducks 7. Penn State 8, Bama 9, Tennessee 10, Missouri 11, and Oklahoma State number 12 for now. I mean, like I said, all this is very early. Oklahoma State being Big 12, it's going to be a up and down year just in general across the Big 12, which is, like I said, Utah could be in instead. We just don't know how the Big 12 is going to play out in general. So it's going to be a fun season. Like I said, we're only going into week 3 now. So we'll just follow along and see what schools and teams pan out. So that, like I said, wraps up for this week. And before I sign off, like I said, feel free to email me at theglasspodcast@gmail.com. That's ATTHE glasspodcast@gmail.com. So at theglasspodcast@gmail.com. Again, shout out to my friend Christian, who's on Twitch. He hasn't been on a little bit, but understandable. But if you are on Twitch and want someone to follow him. He's at Choppa Plays Games. It's Choppa, like, you probably think it's corny, but, Choppa, like when Arnold says, get to the choppa. So CHOPPA Plays Games. So Choppa Plays Games. So, like I said, that's it for me there. So here at the Glass, and as always, we be sipping, and I look forward to covering this week's games and getting an episode out to y'all for next week. Later.